Good evening, gamers, and welcome back to another episode of Lethal Company Concepts. I know I said I wouldn't, but I was wrong, and now this exists. If you haven't watched the last 3 episodes, this series entails me gathering artists from my Discord server and asking them to draw my ideas for a potential new update or DLC or pipe dream for Lethal Company. It's nothing concrete. In the past, it was just a bunch of assorted ideas for various creatures or items or areas. But today, things are different. Today, everything will be themed around one specific moon. So once again, as a reminder, none of these concepts are going to be real. If they are, I'm not responsible for it. I'm just having fun here. If you want to mod them in though, feel free. Just make sure to credit me. Alright, let's get into it. So, as mentioned, everything today takes place on a brand new moon, wholly unique from the others. This moon is a small moon covered in glaciers, a thick shell of ice atop a subsurface ocean, and it goes by the name Tartarus. The moon is all but uninhabitable, though the few facilities that dot the area showcase an attempt at studying it, each one attempting to bore through the ice to discover the secrets of the abyssal ocean below it. All of them failed. And now it's your job to sell what's left of their efforts, but before you do so, you need to actually get to the facility. The shuttle lands at the cliffside of a massive icy glacier. A sheer drop awaits behind you. The only way to go forwards is straight ahead. The air is clear. There are no exterior creatures here, besides the old birds and one other. In the far distance, one might begin to see lights moving quickly over the horizon, or staying in place. A closer look will showcase that those lights are spotlights, roaming the icy wastes, searching for something. This light rests atop a great entity, a spider-like automaton known as a strider. These beasts walk atop 4 sharp metal legs that stab into the ice and allow it to move at terrifyingly fast speeds. They move across the ice from place to place, stopping occasionally to perch like a lighthouse and scan the area before moving to another vantage point, ever vigilant in their search. Luckily, they're passive, though it won't stay that way. If its light rests on you for more than 5 seconds after you leave the facility doors for the first time, that light will turn red, and the strider will leave its dormant state. They will chase you down with violent fervor, attempting to skewer you with their legs whilst keeping their blood-red light on you at all times. It's impossible to kill a strider. At most, you can leave its line of sight in the ship, and once it loses sight of you, it'll need another 5 seconds before aggroing onto you again. These creatures seem to roam the exterior of the facility, as if they're searching for something, and judging by their reaction to you leaving, it could be that their mission is to stop any potential escapees, making sure whatever is contained in these buildings never gets out. How foreboding. Making it past the striders, the employees enter into the facility proper. It's a research facility built over a deep hole in the ice, and they find that the interior layout here is quite different. The first half of this area is above water, and it appears to be the actual research laboratories and storage bays that were used to study the ocean. The walls are slimy and gross. Microorganisms and life forms from the sea have come up unimpeded. The area layout is comprised of a series of long, winding hallways in a grid-like formation, with larger rooms dotted about. These larger rooms rarely connect to each other directly, always having the employees go through the hallways again before reaching one. Some of these areas have open holes that lead deep into the ocean. Many times falling into the sea means certain death, but sometimes they have staircases, allowing the employees to descend deeper safely. But that's for later in the video. Let's talk about what unique items and mechanics the employees can find here. Starting off with the diving helmets. Dotting the larger rooms of the research facility, the employees may find large diving helmets. They weigh about 20 pounds and must be held with 2 hands, initially assumed to just be a scrap item. When picked up, the employees might find these heavy diving helmets have a unique use case, one that'll be quite important later. While holding this item, the employees can left-click to put it on their heads, impairing their vision and hearing slightly, but extending their oxygen timer to 3 minutes. These diving helmets are invaluable when it comes to exploring the lower areas, but their weight makes them impractical to heft around everywhere, not to mention that when you take them off, you have to deal with a 2-handed object. Next up, the dredging stations. Found in rooms with those aforementioned huge open pools, the employees might sometimes find a heavy chain going down into the water and a winch nearby that they can use to pull the chain up. After 1 full minute of this noisy procedure, the platform will raise up and surface, often covered in old sea waste, valuable scrap, but occasionally this process will trawl up an enemy as well. This station serves as a dangerous risk-reward option to make a lot of noise for the chance at a lot of scrap after an extended period of time, but also with the risk of bringing up another thing to worry about. Our final mechanic here are the sonar stations. In some of the larger rooms, the employees can also find what appears to be an old rusted terminal, not unlike the ones in the ship, but this one is much bigger and connected to a large device. Activating this terminal will release a powerful wave of sound through the ocean below, revealing the entire map of the lower area, along with any enemies that might be wandering the lower sections and any scrap that might be there. You're effectively seeing the terminal view of the entire underwater section of the map. However, there's a cost. Using this machine while any employees are under the water will deal a very high amount of damage to them, around 70% of their HP. This blast will also cause their vision to become blurry and slow their movement for a little bit. Make sure you're coordinated. You don't want to doom your teammates. Anyways, now that the gameplay mechanics are out of the way, it's time to move on to the creatures you'll encounter on the surface area of the research facility. Starting off, the janitor drones. The first creatures found in this facility, the janitor drones are a completely passive creature that can be found scooting around the facility, looking for scrap just like the employees. When they find a piece of scrap, they'll pick it up and heft it over their heads, making it very obvious when they have something in their hands. When they do have something in their hands, they'll begin to take it to the nearest opening in the ocean and then throw the item into the water. These items are functionally removed from the map, but can luckily be brought back by utilizing a dredging station, though keep in mind the risks. If you want a janitor drone to stop doing its job, hitting it with a shovel will deactivate it for 20 seconds, so keeping one locked down could be a good way to make sure it doesn't remove any more valuable goods. Though do be wary, hitting a drone has a 5% chance to turn it into a malfunctioning drone. These malfunctioning drones also spawn naturally though. Every time a janitor drone spawns, it's a 25% chance that it will spawn as a malfunctioning drone instead. Malfunctioning drones have bright red eyes, a busted chassis, and appear to be overgrown with urchins? These drones are actively hostile and have begun to see the employees as garbage to be cleaned up. A malfunctioning drone will attempt to pick up an employee by grabbing onto them and initiating a tussle that takes about 2/3 of the employee's stamina to win. If the employee has less than that amount of stamina, they will be picked up and dragged over to the ocean. Winning this tussle has the same effect as hitting the malfunctioning drones, being the 20-second deactivation. Hitting the drone will also cause it to release any players it's carrying. The janitor drones are certainly annoying, but it might be less of a hassle to just let them do their work instead of risking a plunge into the murky depths. Next up, the briners. Small creatures that are barely the size of a snare flea. The briners are reddish-brown arthropods that wander the open hallways looking for morsels of food. They're neutral, not actively chasing any employee or looking to cause trouble, but if their personal space is invaded, they will not hesitate to defend themselves. The briner's main defense is in their name. They will rear up and expose the tips of their abdomen, which have evolved alongside a gland that lets it launch out a spray of vile, yellowish brine. They will only do this after a notable warning. Their warning consists of them rearing up, as mentioned, but the briner will also let out a loud chittering noise and flash its eyes bright red. If their personal bubble is not respected, they will launch the spray at the nearest employee before making a hasty retreat. This brine will also apply a distortion effect to the employee's vision, causing colors to shift and swirl, as well as slowing their movement by 25% and causing any nearby neutral or hostile creatures to turn aggressive and hunt the employee down. Additionally, for the entire 10-second duration of this debuff, all of those aforementioned creatures will know your location constantly. Overall though, do be wary of the briners. Their debuff can be fatal if applied at the wrong time. Next up, the snagglefish. Terrestrial fish about the size of a large bear. These incredibly intimidating creatures can be found wandering the hallways, their massive fins making loud slapping noises as they wander about. Despite the fearsome appearance of these creatures, they're neutral. In fact, these creatures do most of their hunting deep below the water. They only come up to the surface to find a mate. The nests made by these creatures consist of slime-coated pieces of scrap and silt arranged in concentric rings, intended to impress females. Male snagglefish are the only ones employees will ever end up seeing, and they are fiercely defensive of these nests. If even one piece of scrap is misplaced, it could lead to them losing a chance with the ladies. These creatures will patrol around their nest, looking for anything that could threaten it. If any employee is found near the nest, they will often start out by mock charging and roaring loudly to get the employee to run away, but if their patience is tested, or if their personal space is invaded, they will attack viciously, aiming to maim or kill. If the employees are seen, God forbid, taking the scrap from the nest, the snagglefish will get extra aggressive, no longer losing interest once the employees are far enough away from the nest. It will chase until line of sight is lost. Even if the scrap item is dropped, it won't give up the chase. Be very wary of the snagglefish. Give them a wide berth and you might make it out alive. Final creature of the above water segment is the drowned one. Very rarely found spontaneously, these urchin-coated walking corpses are mostly found trawled up through the dredging stations. These creatures hobble about, dripping water everywhere they go. This is one of the only truly aggressive creatures to be found above water. Though navigating the snagglefish and genitodrons can be tough, you can often navigate them without getting murdered if you're careful. The same cannot be said for these bloated fellows. The drowned one acts as a fairly simple aggressive mob. If it sees you, it runs at you and kills you. But more specifically, if it catches you, it will begin to strangle the life out of you. This will initiate a tussle, just like with the malfunctioning drones, taking just as the same 2/3 of the employee's stamina to win. Though the result for failing is quite simple. You die. The drowned one chokes you to death. If you get out, though, you don't leave unscathed. The drowned one will leave you with a lingering debuff that we'll get to in a minute. Besides that, though, drowned ones are loud and relatively slow, but impossible to properly dispatch of. Dealing the 3 damage required to kill one will only cause it to drop to the floor and sit there for about 15 seconds, before getting back up and resuming its hunt. As mentioned earlier, these creatures can mostly be found by the dredging stations, making their use significantly more dangerous than otherwise expected. If you do end up dredging up a drowned one, make sure you give it a wide berth, and keep an ear out for its footsteps. They have a bad habit of sneaking up on you. Once the employees have explored the entire above-water section of the facility, there's only one place to go if they want to explore more. Putting on their diving helmets, the employees will have to find one of the many open rooms with a metal staircase going down into the dark water. As they travel down, they'll find that the underwater section of this facility is quite nightmarish. An array of catwalks suspended above an infinite open sea, with corpses of broken submarines hanging chained amidst the pathways. If the employees look closely, they can see small fish darting about, and a sole red light watching in the distance, as if waiting, stalking. This dark void of open water contains a few interesting features that make it unique from the above-water segment, the first of which being rather simple: radio interference. The deeper down in the water you go, the more distorted signals from walkie-talkies will be, leaving you cut off from the other employees. Only signal translators will be able to reach this far down. Even your voices get muffled by the water. The second main feature of the Abyss is the omnipresence of the urchins, the same urchins that infested the malfunctioning drones and the drowned one. Urchin blobs will appear here and there, growing like tumors on the catwalks and causing any employees who touch them to contract the same debuff that the drowned one applies if you manage to survive its assault, known as the urchin plague. This debuff will slowly drain around 33% of an employee's health over 15 seconds, and if they die while under this effect, their corpse will become overgrown with urchins and become another obstacle. These infested obstacles can be smashed open with 3 hits from a shovel, dispersing the plague and allowing safe passage. Note that the healing jelly from episode 1 of this series will also be able to heal the urchin plague. These urchin-coated obstacles can be found all over the Abyss and serve as a constant bother to any employees that try to traverse this area. The final mechanic unique to this area are the floodlights. The Abyss is usually very dark, with you only really being able to see a small portion in front of you. Your flashlights will only illuminate a small portion of the area. They aren't meant to travel through water. But around the catwalks, you will uncommonly find large, inactive floodlights. Turning them on will shine a bright light that covers tens of meters in a single direction, illuminating the darkness and letting the employees traverse safely. Keep in mind, though, not all the denizens down here appreciate the light. Speaking of those denizens, first of which are the sea lice. These small creatures are found in one spot, infested urchin obstacles. Their mechanics are rather simple. Upon smashing open an urchin obstacle, there's a chance 1 to 4 of these little creatures will pop out and begin to attack the employees. They don't do all that much damage and die in 1 swing of a shovel or 2 swings of a knife. Despite this apparent lack of danger, these creatures can be fatal if underestimated, and add some more danger to the urchin obstacles, with the threat of chip damage if you aren't prepared to deal with these parasitic little dudes. Luckily, their fastest pace is slower than your running pace, and therefore they can be outran, but it's probably more bothersome to leave them wandering the area looking for more employees to attack. Make sure to exterminate them so you don't make it someone else's problem. Next up, the grasping kelp. Floating above the endless open ocean, you can often find patches of this odd kelp near to your only method of passage. This plant appears hauntingly similar to a human hand, though obviously made of kelp. They act similarly too, coming to life if an employee gets within range and attempting to grab onto them. Luckily, they don't pull you down. Rather, these ghastly plants will hold you in place for a bit and then drain your oxygen. If you don't struggle, they will drain all of it and take your corpse down into the depths, but if you mash your jump button or keep running away from it, eventually the kelp will give up and continue listlessly floating in the currents. These plants likely won't end up directly killing anyone, but they definitely can end up slicing off some of your precious O2 bar, making your visage shorter than you'd like. Next up, the watcher eels. These huge creatures are one of the only fully marine species big enough to harm the employees that makes its habitat here. These eels sport a maw of long, thin, sharp teeth that it uses to catch fish mostly, which it spots using these two massive glowing eyes atop its head. These creatures are frighteningly quick, but luckily not immediately hostile. Rather, they will watch curiously from a distance before retreating into the dark, often making for quite the scare if the employees see their frightening mugs looking in from the dark. However, don't write off these creatures as not a threat, as they have one very important feature that makes them quite dangerous. They hate light. A watcher eel, when doing its signature watching, will move closer and closer if the employee is holding out a flashlight, waiting until it gets close enough before quickly dashing in and taking a chomp out of the employee's backside, dealing around 40 damage to them. This fate can be avoided by simply putting away your flashlight until the watcher eel leaves, or optionally, by turning on a floodlight. No floodlights last long in the abyss because the watcher eels will immediately run over and begin to attack them if one is nearby and activated. This can be used as a last-ditch effort to get an angry one off your tail, or could simply be an annoyance as your main light source gets cut off by an angry eel. Be wary of your lights down here, they might get you ripped apart. But for how dangerous this place is touted to be, it certainly doesn't feel deadly. Keep your lights away, avoid the lice and kelp, simple. But as the employees traverse, they might begin to feel uneasy. That red light in the distance continues to stare them down, circling like a shark. But the minute the employees look away, they find that they might have opened themselves up to a predator. The employees search for scrap as the shadow looms, before eventually, as they loaf around, the light ducks away and a shadow moves in, bigger than they could have imagined. It quietly moves towards the catwalk they're on, before a massive eye opens in front of them amidst a field of urchins, like algae growing on the hull of a long-since defunct submarine. An alarm sounds loudly, like a monster's roar, as the Overtaken begins its rampage. The same alarm that the crew heard on this vessel's not-so-final voyage. The Overtaken is the main threat of the Abyss, the remains of an old submarine, taken over by the urchins and turned into their ultimate enforcer. It will stalk the edges of the Abyss, watching the employees with its sole red light giving away its location, and when it sees fit, it will begin to silently sneak up on them, placing its stern right up to a catwalk and opening its singular bright red eye. This eye shines a bright spotlight, not dissimilar to the Striders, and if it catches an employee in its sight, it will enter into attack mode, slamming its entire weight into the catwalks, causing them to shake or potentially even break, and causing any employees nearby to take damage, even instantly killing employees that are hit directly by its attack. The Overtaken is relentless, blaring its alarm constantly and chasing down employees no matter where they run so long as they remain underwater, only stopping and returning to its circling patterns once all the employees caught in its first scouting view have died or fled above water. The Overtaken must be avoided at all costs. Employees must watch their backs so it doesn't catch them off guard, listen in to the sounds of whirring engines, near silent amidst the churning ambience of the abyss, and perhaps you might escape its gaze. Perhaps the scientists were wise to abandon this place. If the urchins can make something this formidable, who knows what they could do if they were able to leave this planet. Thank goodness the Striders still work. And that's my idea. I hope you all enjoyed the video. I wanted to make a more connected episode so I could build a more concrete setting. I know it doesn't super fit into the gameplay style of Lethal Company. Most areas have all sorts of monsters in them, so one moon having one specific cast of creatures wouldn't really work. But I like it, and that's all that matters. If you also liked it though, I'd appreciate it if you could hit the validation buttons down there, you know which ones, and maybe check out my Patreon if you don't mind. I've got a poll there for the next video. Points at it. But enough shilling. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.